So we are faced with an increasingly urgent question. What can be done about this out-of-control court? Well, today, Democrats in the House Oversight Committee held a roundtable on the ethical crisis in the Supreme Court. I should note that one of the expert legal witnesses there was my wife, Kate Shaw. Leading that panel was Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin, the ranking member of the Oversight Committee, and New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the vice-ranking member, and they both join me now. It's good to have you on.
Thanks for having us.
Congressman, I'll start with you just about what the agenda was today to convene this. Obviously, you can't call hearings yourself as a ranking member and not the chair. But what were you trying to do today?
Well, the oversight Democrats wanted to respond to the national clamor over this crisis of legitimacy at the Supreme Court. And so we analyzed the ethics crisis. We analyzed the political crisis around confirmations that got us into this and the blockaded confirmations of people like Merrick Garland, who was nominated by President Obama to the court. And then we began to talk about what sorts of things could be done, both in the specific case of Justices Alito and Thomas, and then generally about the ethical collapse at the Supreme Court. It's the highest court in the land with the lowest ethical standards. These are the only governmental officials in the land who are not governed by a binding ethics code. There's no process by which we can hold any of them accountable. And so it violates the essential principle that James Madison identified as the heart of our justice system, which is that no man can be a judge in his own cause. So we began to, explore different avenues of holding them accountable.
Yeah, Congresswoman, you said something towards the end of the hearing, just saying that it just cannot be the case as sort of a constitutional matter, as an almost intuitive common sense matter, that they are not subject to any checks, right? We have three co-equal branches. There's checks and balances that move between the three directions. And the position which Justice Alito has actually taken on the record, he actually said in a Wall Street Journal interview that Congress has no ability to regulate us whatsoever. What should Congress be doing? What are you brainstorming, basically? Like, what's the conversation about what those checks can be?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, Justice Alito's position is laughable in this idea that he can be and that the court should be accountable to nobody, and that the only person that they should be accountable to are themselves. This kind of Scout's promise sort of set up for how we should be having ethics standards for the highest and most consequential court in the land. It is completely unacceptable. And not only is it unacceptable, but to have any one of our co-equal branches be completely unaccountable to the others is paving the path to authoritarianism, tyranny, the abuse of power in the United States, and it is structurally completely unsustainable. And so it is not a question of if Congress has jurisdiction and power over the Supreme Court. It is what power are we going to exercise in order to rein in a fundamentally unaccountable and rogue court. And one of the beautiful things about today's roundtable is that we were able to also call in one of our Senate colleagues, Senator Whitehouse, who has been pursuing extensive investigations into the dark money network that has been exerting influence over the court. And we raised and discussed a varying degree of measures, from term limits to an actual binding ethics standard. And also Congressman Raskin and myself will be introducing forthcoming legislation to even have the Supreme Court be subject to the same $50 gift rule that he and I are subject to as everyone else is as members of Congress.
Yeah, that is a great point. I mean, my understanding, I was talking to my wife, Kate Shaw, about this the other night, who gave testimony today before your hearing, and she pointed out to me that, if I'm not mistaken, that things like, for instance, you can get a book deal as a Supreme Court justice, right? That's allowed, but you couldn't be a partner in Wilmer Hale, right? Like, you clearly, and that's something that Congress passed a statute to say that what you couldn't do, because obviously it'd be nuts to be a Supreme Court justice and have a side gig as a lawyer. Like, we all understand that. Presumably, Congressman Raskin, you can change, Congress can pass statutes that say this activity is just not allowed.
I mean, Congress has a ban on outside employment, and as AOC was saying, we have a $50 gift ban, so none of us goes anywhere near doing that.
Oh, you don't do $500,000 vacations?
Well, I mean, that's
free?
the comical thing. I mean, members of Congress don't even understand that. Under what circumstances would a Supreme Court justice be accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in foreign travel or paid tuition for family members or a recreational vehicle, motor stagecoach? It's just outlandish for us to contemplate. I mean, that's like a jailable offense for people over here. And it's just like the normal business as usual at the Supreme Court that they're collecting millions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of dollars from their so-called friends. And so we need to clean that up. And that's why, we said we're going to start with something simple that the whole country will be able to understand immediately and intuitively. We want a $50 gift ban for U.S. Supreme Court justices. They make $300,000 a year, pay for your own lunch, and pay for your own vacation.
Yeah, that does seem quite clear, Congresswoman, and also has the advantage, again, there's particular issues to deal with the members of this court. But in some ways, the only way to legislate it or for Congress to act is outlaying some broad principles that are equally applicable.
Absolutely. And as all of us as public servants and federal public servants, whether it is both chambers of Congress, whether it is the White House, many of us are subject to the same, if not extremely similar and uniform code of ethics. And the fact that the Supreme Court, which is already unelected, at least for those of us who run for office, we have to rerun for office every 2 years here in the House. For an unelected body of 9 people appointed for life to not have any sort of binding, strict ethics code to which they can not only be held accountable, but which can be enforced is actually ludicrous. And it's almost unbelievable that we are sitting here in the year 2024, over 200 years after the establishment of this country, and that we actually have not addressed this issue. It is something that is long past doing, and it's common sense.
One of the things that we addressed, Chris, was how the private corruption of the justices mirrors the public corruption of justice. And it is this Roberts Court, this right-wing corporate court, which has been dismantling civil rights law, civil liberties, women's right to choose an abortion, labor law, consumer law, you name it. So as they grow more and more removed from the experiences of the way the rest of us live, the more they're willing to just demolish the protections the rest of us need.
There's a bunch of things that happened today outside of the purview of this question of the court, though, do have to do with sort of equal justice under law. And I wonder if both of you would stick around to talk about that. Is that all right?
Love to.
Yeah.
Great.